So if you've studied the scriptures before, you may know that John's gospel is unique from the other three gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are all what we call synoptic gospels because they serve like a synopsis of Jesus' life and ministry. They tell many of the same stories. They're in a roughly chronological order, and they use similar language and sentence structure throughout. John's gospel, on the other hand, is built around themes. It often mixes up the timeline, and it's structured around stories that are often unique from the other three gospels. And the stories are intended to help us understand the core or essential truths, theological truths about Jesus. It is, when you study it and you see all of the intricacies of its structure, it's a literary masterpiece. John's Gospel is a wonderfully written piece. Well, in our story today, John highlights two of these recurring themes that are found throughout the Gospel: light and dark, belief and unbelief. And he uses a man named Nicodemus, who we only read of in John's Gospel, as this vehicle to help us understand or learn these deeper truths. In verse 1, we are introduced to Nicodemus. He is a Pharisee. He is a member of the ruling council, also known as the Sanhedrin, and it presides over, the political affairs and the religious affairs of the temple. In every way, this is a man that should understand the deep things of the Jewish belief. He should know the prophets. He should know the law. He should know of this coming Messiah. But we see in verse 2 that Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night. He is in the dark, which was likely literally accurate. And there's a reason. He probably came in the dark because he was afraid of what others might think. But John includes this detail to also highlight a theme that he's going to pick up at the end of the story. This teacher of the faith, the ruler of the temple, is in the dark. He's in the dark regarding Jesus, the long hoped for Jewish Messiah. Well, the exchange begins by, Nicodemus addressing Jesus with this expression of honor. He has the sense that Jesus has come from God based on, as he says, the signs that he sees that Jesus has been performing. But as John records the dialogue, Jesus, immediately takes control of this conversation after the opening pleasantries. He tells Nicodemus that one can only see the kingdom of God by being born again, or actually more literally the term is being born from above. Now, this would have been a strange thing to hear, of course, just on its own face value. And for many reasons it would have been strange. But can you think of why it might have been strange for this temple ruler, this idea of being born again or born from above as being a condition for entrance into the kingdom of God? Well, it was strange because the kingdom of God, this great future kingdom that the Jews were anticipating, an eternal kingdom of peace and riches and comfort and no enemies, was considered a birthright of the Jewish people. According to their traditions, one was going to see and enter this eternal kingdom because they were born in the line of Abraham. They were children of Abraham, born from him. But here, Rabbi Jesus, the teacher of the faith, is saying that the kingdom is not for those simply born of Abraham, but rather he's saying it is for those that have been born from above being a reference to the heavens or born of God. The kingdom, Jesus says to this Pharisee Nicodemus, will be those who have been born of God. Now, Nicodemus is confused by this, right? You would be as well. I certainly would be as well. If we had been born and steeped in one system of belief, we would be confused by what Jesus is saying. And so Nicodemus then asks what is actually the really obvious question. How can someone be born a second time? You've been born once. Now you're supposed to be born again or born from above? And you can see here, right, this hook is being set by Jesus, this master teacher and this master searcher of people. He's searching for Nicodemus here. And so Jesus answers the question, but his answer, you note, isn't exactly direct. It's like in his answer, he offers a further commentary or a further explanation of the first answer about being born from above. He tells Nick That the way of being born into the kingdom will mean being born of water and born of the Spirit. It's like he's saying, Nicodemus, you must be born from above, and this means you must be born of water and Spirit. But what did that mean? He wasn't talking of amniotic fluid, being born of that water. That was the water that we have in our first birth. It was a reference to the baptism of water. The baptism of water that people will go through as a sign of their belief in Jesus, and a baptism of the water of the Spirit that God will pour out as a sign or as a seal of their belief. But of course, Nicodemus doesn't understand this either. He's confused. And again, so would you, so would I. The only reason that you and I have any idea about what Jesus is talking about here really is because of hindsight. In the moment, it would have been very confusing. You must be born from above? What does that mean? Oh, you must be born of water and Spirit? What are you talking about, Jesus? It would have all been very confusing. And so again, Nicodemus asks this next obvious question. Well, how can this be? And it's like he's saying, I've known my whole life, teacher, that the kingdom of God is ours because we are born of Abraham. But now you are telling me that I must be born from above, or born of water, or born of the Spirit to enter into this kingdom. And so Jesus responds. I don't know if he's incredulous or if he's just, again, seeking out Nicodemus. He says to him, you are a teacher of Israel, and you don't know these things? Maybe that's the tone that he's saying these things in. But of course, Nicodemus doesn't. These are the deep truths of heaven, which Jesus is bringing into the world. And Jesus knows them, he says in this section, because he has come from heaven. He says to Nicodemus that he has come from above. And so it's something that he knows about. But Nicodemus does not yet know about it. And he's not yet, are you ready for it? He's not yet ready to believe. And so he finishes by reminding Nicodemus then about the story of Moses. The story, you may have heard of it before. It's recorded in the book of Numbers. It's a strange, strange story. But Nicodemus would have known this story very well. It was a story about how the Israelites had disobeyed God, and so God sent venomous snakes into their camp. Terrified by these snakes because they were being bitten by them, they come to their leader Moses and they ask for help. And Moses seeks out God, and Moses then is instructed by God to have a bronze snake cast. And he's supposed to put it on a pole and raise the pole up above the people. And the people were to look up at the snake. And when they did, as the story goes, they were healed, they were saved, they were delivered from the snakes. They just needed to look at the pole and believe. Now, it's quite a story. And as a side note, stories like this one here of Moses are found in other ancient religious traditions as well. And they explain, as a further side note, why the medical symbol that we all know and have seen around involves a snake and a pole. The snake raised on the pole was for the healing and saving of the people. Did you ever know that's where that image came from? Now you do. Well, back to our story, Jesus takes this story from Numbers and he uses it as a reference to himself. He says to Nicodemus that like that snake was raised up on the pole, so the Son of Man will be raised up, an allusion to the cross. And just as everyone looked at that snake and was saved, so too would those who believed and looked and saw and put their eyes upon the Son of Man raised up on that cross. You see what Jesus was saying to Nicodemus standing there in the darkness? The kingdom of God wasn't based on our birthright. No, our citizenship in God's great kingdom required us to be born from above, born of God. And that rebirth would be based on our belief in the Son of Man who was raised up on the cross. That Son of Man that could save us from our snakes, which were always the symbol of evil and darkness. When we look to Jesus, we would be saved. That's what the story is saying. Delivered from darkness and evil. And the mark of this would be our baptism in water and our baptism in the Spirit. And this then is where this story with Nicodemus ends. The rest of the passage, actually, from this point on, is John's commentary on that scene that took place with Nicodemus. The famous words of John 3:16, they are the words of John, not Jesus. But when you read it, given what I just said, it should all make sense. Let's read it together. I'll put it up on the screen. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him, whoever sees him, whoever comes to him and sees him raised up on that pole, should not perish, should not be consumed by the snakes, but they should have life, the life of the kingdom of God. Well, for God did not send his Son Jesus into the world to condemn the world. That's not the mission of Jesus, is to bring condemnation into the world, but to save the world, just like that pole and the snake in the story of Numbers. And whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people love darkness. They loved the snake, so to speak, instead of light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light so that it may be seen plainly what they have done and has been done in the sight of God. And as we carry on then throughout the rest of John's gospel, we will meet Nicodemus 2 other times. And we see this journey then that happens in this man as he goes from dark into light. And in the end, this Pharisee will show up as Jesus has died. He will be the one who will buy the spices to anoint the body of Jesus, which will be an act not of derision, but an act of tender honor that is born, no doubt, out of his worship and belief in Jesus. This is what it says at the end of the story. Later, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he feared the Jewish leaders. With Pilate's permission, he came and he took the body away. He was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who earlier had visited Jesus at night. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrhs and aloes, about 75 pounds. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it. You see the tenderness of this scene with spices and strips of linen. This was in accordance with the Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid, because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. What a beautiful story. And may this journey from dark to light then be true of us too. May all of us look to Jesus on the cross in this season as the one who saves. May all of us in him be born from above. And if you've never been baptized as a mark of this belief, again, I urge you, why not? Why don't you get baptized? May the Lord bless you, and may you have faith to believe in this season. Much love to you all.